Are you ready to do some trade tips?
I am. So, as inspired by last week when we were talking with our guest Nick, we figured we should just dive into some trade tips. I think it's a good juncture of the season at which you can start exploring trades because you're deep enough now that you kind of can understand what your squad's strengths and weaknesses are, maybe if you have certain holes in the lineup. And it's a time of year where every team is still in contention. So theoretically, every team in your league should still be engaged and active in trade talks, right? So let's dive in. Let's start doing some trade tips. We're going to start with tip number one. And that is, I think this is the most important tip of all. It's to know other teams as well, or better even than your own team. Study their rosters and understand what they do and especially what they don't need. If you want to shut down a trade talk, if you offer somebody a top goaltender, they already have two, they don't need that asset, right? So you want to understand exactly where our team's holes are, and that's a great way to facilitate trading. If you're going to a team and immediately offering the player and position that they need the most or the stat they need the most. Oh, I noticed you're in the Roto rankings, you're dead last in goals. Well, here's the top goal scorer in the league. You want to talk trade? Knowing their roster is absolutely crucial. So that is tip number one.
Number two, I like this one. Prey on emotion. And that just kind of a personal experience was I was playing against a guy who really, really liked Max Domi. And I saw that he was not playing well. I offered him up for Varlamov. And, I needed an extra goalie just to have insurance. Varlamov's looking pretty good right now. Max Domi is not. And I took advantage of this guy, knowing that he is such a huge Max Domi fan. And that's not, I think he actually is on the verge of getting rid of him.
Yes. Preying on emotion, it's my favorite tactic. It's what I'm kind of known for in fantasy, and it applies in so many different ways. So if there's a homer of a certain team, you can prey on that emotion by offering players from that team. One of my favorites is if you have a good memory for trivial things, which I do. If you remember a player that was on a winning team of someone a previous season, so let's say you have someone and okay, this GM had this player last year and they won the championship. They're going to have positive memories of that player. They're going to trust that player to break out of slump X or slump Y. You might be able to get them to overpay a little bit. The two main examples I use for preying on emotion is in identifying the best type of trade partners. One is a GM in head-to-head who just lost badly, just took a huge beat down. You lost 11-1. You're reeling on Monday morning, looking at the standings. Oh, God, I need a shakeup. That's when you pounce and try and make an offer because they're going to be more likely to want to do something rash. They're angry at their team. The other one is, I do this a lot, a GM that just suffered a catastrophic injury. So, for example, let's say you have Eric Gustafson. Hey, notice you just lost Adam Fox. Well, I happened to pick up Gustafson last week, and maybe we can talk trade because then you can handcuff Adam Fox and pounce on the manager that's panicking over the injury. That's a big one.
Yep, I like that one. All right, this one, be generous when you can afford it. I'm interested to see where you could take this.
Yes, so you don't want to get a reputation as the stingy GM who is obsessed with winning massively on every trade. And I think there's a way to sort of distort your reputation for the better. So if you have a major surplus at a position or in a stat and you have a league that has plenty of bench fodder, then don't be afraid to kick in that extra piece. Even if it means on paper you're kind of overpaying for a trade. Well, this other guy's getting more value. This other GM is getting more value. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're improving what's in your starting lineup. And that is going to make that GM more likely to want to deal with you later. And it even could tilt the scales, or maybe people think you lose the deal. And then people think you're someone that can be taken advantage of on a trade. I like that as well. Anything that invites future trading and improves your reputation in that sense is a good thing.
Yep. I've can't even tell you how many very super generous offers I made this year that were turned down that have paid off poorly for the other team. The next one is don't gloat post-trade. That's important.
Yes, this one is pretty simple. If you win a deal, you just don't want to be on the board just bragging about how you fleeced the other GM or how well your new players are doing. It's just going to leave a bad taste in that GM's mouth and make them not want to deal with you. Simple as that.
Yep, that's basic. Advertising is okay as a last resort.
Yeah, so advertising it can really backfire on you. It's something I do pretty often, but often it blows up in my face. So if you have not exhausted every avenue to trade a certain player and you go immediately to your message board and advertise, what happens to me at least is the wolves, the piranhas just tear that player apart, and you have a message board of just like 10 people crapping on that player, saying how bad they are, and it's actually really everyone reads it, and you're like, oh my god, everyone's posting horrible stuff about my player. They're just slamming this player. They're posting all these stats, screenshots of their game log. They'll do anything, right, to just dump on that player. So you want to make sure you've exhausted all avenues first. But if you have, and you really know, let's say you have an injury, you're going to have to drop someone, you really need to make a trade. You've gone through every other GM, you can't seem to find a deal, then you have nothing to lose. You may as well advertise, because once in a while you do that, and then someone who you didn't think was a trade partner might come forward and say, oh, actually, I'm interested in this player. So sometimes it can help you.
Have you ever gone on the comments of a player on the Yahoo app?
Yes.
I love it. Like Brandon Smith, stink sandwich, retirement is calling you. You suck. Ryan Reeves. So no hits. What is your reason for existing? And then what would you say you do here?
Yeah.
Freddie Goudreau, trade for Wayne Gretzky. Phil Kessel. I'd rather the Amazon driver who just left my house play instead of this guy. It's not good. Honestly, some of them are really creative, and some of them are just totally like, what the heck? And I guess the last one we have here is don't walk away from a deal because of pride.
Yes, this to me is the most emotionally complex of the tips. So one thing I see pretty often, again, because I'm the most active trader in maybe in the history of fantasy sports, it's an addiction almost. Like I made 2 trades this morning in fantasy football alone, just before we started recording the podcast. And I think what's important about this tip is you see people walk away from trades because they're feeling emotional and they're frustrated with the other GM. Oh, you took too long. Oh, I don't like this offer. That's fine. But you're only hurting yourself if you do that, because you might be missing out on a deal that if you just stayed a little more patient, maybe you waited one extra day, you were frustrated, you pulled an offer down because someone took too long. Maybe that person had a busy day at work, and if you just waited that extra day, they were going to accept the deal. You're just hurting yourself. You might be thinking you're winning the battle of pride, battle of wits, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's just about getting better players and making your team better. So take the emotion out of it. Don't walk away just on account of pride.